Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. Excited to be back and excited to have Johnathan Schofield from ChannelFalcon on today for a super people-oriented conversation. So right in my freaking wheelhouse, man, I hope. Matt, how was your week? Johnathan, how was your week? How were your weeks?
For me, I was ice skating at the beginning of the week. Not for fun, That's just the world that I live in this hellscape. But all the snow left. It looks like springtime. I don't know. I'm crossing my finger. Nature forgets about February.
Don't they let that little hog out? They had a hog in the ground.
I'm way north of Pennsylvania, man. Like, we don't get hogs up here. We just get like more ice.
Oh man. What about you, Johnathan? How are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a great week here in the upstate of South Carolina, where I'm from. Since you guys decided to talk about the weather, it's been raining like nonstop. But today it's sunny, warm, and it's not been warm.
What's warm for you?
I'll tell you, it's like 69, 68 degrees. No, 69 degrees right now.
That's warm. Yeah. That's good. That's warm. That's warm in springtime. You're like, yeah, that's nice. I'm happy 40 right now. I walk outside and 40 is t-shirt weather right now after what we just went through.
Yeah, I feel you. Well, my pipes froze 2 weeks ago, so it can get chilly here as well.
Oh, that's a quick turnaround. Well, you guys definitely have hogs in South Carolina. You've got a fox back there.
Yeah, I do. That was a gift from my youngest daughter, Luna, as a Christmas gift. She went into her toy box and dug that out, and she knows that I like foxes, so she gave.
Did she wrap it?
No. She's wearing Where's Waldo glasses though.
You have a lot of Where's Waldo stuff then, I think.
No, there's stories behind the Waldo stuff. Yeah, for sure.
give us one Waldo story, and then I know Matt has a question about a specific Waldo item in there.
Oh, I mean, I don't know many people that have more than one Waldo story.
They just can't find the guy.
For me, IT Nation 2 years ago, it was actually IT Nation Secure 2 years ago. The company that I was with at the time, they came to me and like, man, we paid to have an item in the gift bag when you registered, right? Mm. So we were sponsoring, and we were like, well, they came to me, our marketing department came to me and said, what should we do? And I was like, well, let's do something that will drive some traffic to our booth and get some engagement, something that's fun and different. Mm-hmm. So we came up with this idea that some idiot would dress up as Waldo. And I was the idiot for that particular event. And then if you notice these 3.5-inch floppies on my wall, these were we put stickers on them, and it basically said, "Where's Waldo? He's hanging out in the hotel. Go find him. Give him this for a chance to win." It's like a virtual reality headset or something, and so that is the story, and that's the only reason I have Waldo glasses. And the shirt's literally in a closet right there. So
I like that.
We gotta up our game, Zach. We had our own Where's Waldo at IT Nation, but it was just us tracking down our swag.
That's great.
I like it. It was great because people were walking around like, "Hey, it's Waldo," and then all of a sudden, all of the attendees come to you. And so it worked really well. It was fun. One of those moments in my career in sales I was really proud of.
So I gotta ask, and I remember a little bit of this story, but you're sporting two logos today. We got ChannelFalcon up in the bar and down in your title bar, but you're wearing Dark Horse too. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Dark Horse Business Systems is the parent brand of ChannelFalcon. And we launched in 2020. And back then, this was really before I was really heavily involved in the MSP channel. Back then, our whole go-to-market motion was outsourced business development for technology companies. And so ChannelFalcon was the next evolution of that because any MSP owners or sales folks on the call will resonate with this. But turns out selling managed IT is not the same as SaaS or cloud or pizzas or shoes. So ChannelFalcon is its own unique thing, and it's early on. We're about 6 months old. I guess September 1st is when we went public with the brand. So that's, yeah, Dark Horse ChannelFalcon. That's the child company of Dark Horse Business Systems.
That's awesome.
All right.
Were you a Captain Falcon Super Smash Brothers Melee player? Is that where that comes from, or tell me more?
No, I wish I could say that it had a really great origin story like that. Honestly,
I don't know if that qualifies as really great, but
well, I have very distinct memories of the parties in the dorm in college. The Super Smash Bros. Parties, but no, I never really played that often.
Where's the name?
I was more of the StarCraft and Delta Force, if people even know what that is or was at the time. And then we did LAN parties, cables all over the hallways and stuff, and
awesome.
So less Smash Brothers.
Very, very cool. Well, shall we dive into some control stuff, Matt? Is it time?
Yeah, we can jump in and do that here. Well, it looks like we got a shout out, so I'll share that. And all right, let's jump in here. If we can find the button. There it is. Gotta love the NIST animation.
I love the wheel. I wish it would run a little longer just so I can watch it make a full rotation.
I was just dive into the tunes.
My kids watch these like videos sometimes that are just like there's like no content other than it's like visually complex, like strange stuff to stare at, and
like those old school screensavers from back in the day.
Oh, it's like the media player from Windows 95 when you would play your CD, and it was like, oh man, that was the coolest thing.
All right, well, NIST CSF 2, which
the second coolest thing.
Not quite in final form yet, but we're at nearly final, and that means we know what the categories are. We know the definitions of those categories. Most of the subcategories are also set, and we're waiting on templates and some other things before they go to final on NIST CSF 2. And just like the older version of NIST CSF, they divide up the security realm into multiple functions, and there's a new one this time around, govern. But today we're talking about an old one, which is the detect category, or DE. So 6 different security domains. Detect is one of those things you need to do to have an effective security program. We'll drill down right now, starting with continuous monitoring. So, continuous monitoring as a category has 9 subcategories. It's all about monitoring your assets, just keeping an eye on them, right, on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to talk about some of those things real quick, so you guys understand. When we're talking about detecting in a security function, what NIST says about that. So they say that, and this is the subcategory of DE.CM, 01. Networks and services, networks and network services should be monitored for adverse events. So, does the traffic look different than normal? Are there unusual devices on the network? Is there different DNS traffic happening on the network than normal? Right. So there's a lot of different tools.
Yeah, that's literally what I was going to say. I could think of some tools that are used to monitor those things, but you need a person still at some point.
You need a toolbox for this because there's no product to do that. I mean, there are products that are individual tools, but to really monitor your network and network services, you need to bring a toolbox. And we don't need to get into vendors, but let's just say that the industry solutions out there are quite diverse when it comes to how to monitor a network, and you need to bring a few of them together to really monitor the network well. But you also, and in CM.2, you need to monitor the physical event. So, if all of your cybersecurity is based on the fact that things are either locked up in a secure cloud or they're locked up in a secure office, right? That does mean you need to think about the security of those facilities. And if you if you're in a safe cloud, probably they're handling their physical security for you. But we've all got stuff on our desks, right? So we might need to think about alarm systems, security guards, just having good locks on doors is part of it. Knowing who comes and goes, sign-in sheets, that kind of thing.
Matt, are you telling me that I need to get a bouncer right outside my office here? Is that what you're saying?
So, look, when I went through my cybersecurity training, which was a few years ago now, I was floored by the idea that the most advanced version of a detective control is always a security guard. Like the best detective control you can have is a person.
Better than AI, Matt? AI, Matt?
Better than AI. So far.
I was gonna say until Boston Dynamics whips up the AI version of their robot. And
Yeah, we'll see.
Actually, throw you out of the office.
Oh God, I don't want to get thrown out of the office.
Well. All right. So, so in addition to the physical environment, you also need to modify like sort of people flows, right? Like what are people doing inside your network on their machines? Like, are they sending 1,000 emails today? Is that normal, right? Are they logging in from unusual places in the world where you know that they are not? Like, are they logging in from Australia, but they're actually in the office right now and you're in North America, right?
They're just spoofing for Pokemon Go.
Yep. But you also need to do this across your external service providers. So Office 365, QuickBooks, online banking. You guys have clouds. Everyone's got stuff in the cloud. Infrastructure clouds. So you need to monitor those things too, to make sure when people are logging in, making settings, changes, or provisioning things, or just accessing those systems from a read perspective, that you're sort of monitoring who's doing that, what they're doing, what's normal, what's not normal. And then, if we look at, and this is the thing that I think people are most familiar with is like the actual computing and software and runtime environments. And this is the kind of thing that antivirus softwares or anti-malware softwares are particularly good at is looking at, hey, is there stuff going on this machine? Like, we're phoning home to a phishing server, right? Are we looking for missing patches on a machine, right? Are we looking for actual pieces of malware installed on a machine, right? And that's also part of this. But it's worth noting that stuff that's really familiar to service providers also needs to be paired up with those other things that maybe sound a little bit less familiar, or you do not have a really complete detective capability. So that's all stuff that you need to be doing just to like monitor your systems as they are normally, so that when not normal stuff are happening, you can see that it's not normal. Any questions?
I've got one. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when we were going through CIS, we often had the opportunity to discuss these types of businesses should do this. These types of businesses should do this. These should do this. And anybody dealing with this, you may be surprised, but you're having this scenario. It seems a little less prescriptive on this side. Could you talk a little bit about that?
And that you're pointing to one of the crucial differentiators of NIST CSF, which is that it is less prescriptive. It's pretty vague, in fact. I just mentioned a bunch of things, guys. We talked about all sorts of things we're supposed to be monitoring, but NIST CSF says nothing about how to do that, how good to do it, where should you do it, when should you do it. Like, it really doesn't talk about that at all. They just like basically name all these categories of things and subcategories of things, and then they point to other cybersecurity standards to get like the definitions of exactly how to do that. And so for each of those things I just named, right, like physical security is a great example, right? In a basic office, you could just have a lock on the door, right? Or you could upgrade your security and have a camera, or you could upgrade your security and make sure that lock is like a digital lock with individual credentials you can lock out, right? So there's many different versions of that, and NIST CSF does not get prescriptive there, and it's not the intent of the exercise. The intent of the exercise of using this framework is to make sure that you've thought about all of these categories. You're doing something in all of these categories, right? Because if you're missing any of these things, an attacker will find their way in that way.
I've got another question.
Yeah, shoot.
When would you be inclined to use NIST CSF versus CIS?
So we're going to be talking about humanizing uh, technical services in a few minutes, right?
Right.
One of the great things about NIST CSF is, I mean, and this is like, this is a boring lecture we're going through, right, guys? Unless you're like super
I'm
geeky,
freaking
right?
riveted so
If you're
far.
not geeky, like your eyes are just rolling into the back of your head right now, probably. But you know, if we look at one of the more prescriptive frameworks, we have anywhere between 150 and 500 or even 800 individual technical controls with specific definitions. And like, man, is that a deep read that basically no business owner ever wants to know anything about. However, every single one of these like categories, right, is something that you could talk to a small business owner about, right? And they'll basically understand that thing. They will understand the intent and the spirit, and they will understand that thing you are trying to deliver, that thing you're trying to sell or get them to invest in, right?
Sure.
And when we look at the 6 NIST functions that each only have a few categories each, that's it's actually a conversation you can have. Like when they ask, like, why do I have to buy this thing? I don't understand, right? You can
That,
point to a piece of material that comes from the government that they actually have a chance of understanding, right?
that makes a lot of sense too. And now that you describe it that way, when you look at it, it's like, yeah, detect. Here are the things that are part of detect. That's pretty easy to talk about. I could say continuous monitoring to a fellow pizza franchisee, and they would get like, yeah, I monitor the network continuously. I get that.
Right.
But going into detail about the tool itself, I could see how somebody could get lost. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to give you one other value of NIST CSF. This one's harder for me to defend as a technologist, but it's absolutely real. If you do business with a state or municipal government entity, so state government agency, local city, local school, if these are your clients, guys, if you're selling to these people, those government workers are trained to think in NIST CSF. It's written into law in most states in the U.S. Up at the federal level, they use actually different NIST standards, but municipal, local, state, they love NIST CSF, and it's the thing that if you're going to have a security conversation with those people, you have to talk in that language.
Cool beans. Have we not?
For me, I really latch on to visuals, right? And you made a comment, or kind of at the beginning, the tool versus the toolbox. And in a former life, when my team provided security services, a similar analogy that I'm kind of hearing from this particular detect function. A takeaway for me is like the way we would talk to our customers about it is we wouldn't necessarily say tool versus toolbox, but we would be like, all right, layers of defense guarding a castle, and it's like you wouldn't guard a castle without walls or without the moat or, the guys in the tower keeping vigilant, and that's what I latch onto here is that the message I'm hearing from these particular things is like, you got to be prepared across multiple vectors and a lot of different things that you have to be, monitoring and so forth. So that's what I'm taking away.
So I jumped right in. I should probably say before I finish off with the adverse event stuff, which is the stuff that geeks like really love. But the reason we have this detect function is because you can't possibly secure everything. I think most technologists know that you can't stop all the attacks, but you can like discover an attack when it happens. Like the user clicks on the link, they download the thing. Like you don't stop it in real time, but then they install the thing, and then you finally get the payload on the machine. That you can detect, right? And so that's the reason why we have a detect function, so that you can respond appropriately, right? And so you can respond fast, timely manner, right, before damage is done. We just talked about continuous monitoring. It is so important. I want to just emphasize how important that continuous monitoring is before we get to the part that people really love and they probably spend too much time on, the adverse event analysis. Continuous monitoring is about monitoring what's normal, monitoring what's going right, so that when it's not going right, that difference in traffic, that difference in what's going on, right, there's difference in events is something that you can detect. Because Adverse events, which we're going to talk about in a minute, they're sometimes obvious and they're sometimes not. So to catch the non-obvious ones, you need to do the continuous monitoring. But guys, sex sells, and in the cybersecurity world, this adverse event analysis category is like the sexiest category of cyber tooling there is. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes on it.
Hubba hubba.
Look, people just like geeks love this stuff, right? I'm a geek.
I'm
I
geared
get
up.
it.
I'm excited.
We're looking for anomalies that are closely associated with things that are clearly bad, right? So one thing we need to do is we need to analyze events that are not normal. So that let's say that we notice a thing that's not normal, right? And maybe we even know it's malicious, but we don't know how bad it is, right? So how do you analyze that, right? An advanced organization is going to use a SIM, which is a security information and event monitoring system.
Cool.
It's a log collector, right? But the point is that it's indexed and searchable across security criteria. Now, most MSPs don't have the bandwidth, like the person bandwidth, to manage or implement a SIM. But if you are, locking up all your logs and events away in a SOC, right? At the very least, if there is a bad event, someone later can come back and dig through that archive for forensics, right? So if there is an incident, you can see how bad it is. So get those adverse events put someplace where they can be analyzed, right? Another piece here is to correlate from multiple sources. Again, we're talking about bringing that information in from your firewall, from your endpoint, from your email server, right? From your SaaS. Bring all those events together from multiple places so you can do that analysis across different things. And then you want to estimate impact and scope of an adverse event when it exists. So something bad happened. Oh, great. We've got all that information in one place. We can correlate across different devices. That allows us to potentially impact. Okay, we estimate the impact. Like device one was compromised. We see device one talk to device two, talk to device three. Well, we know that all those three things could be potentially impacted. We know that device 4 maybe is not impacted because device 4 didn't talk to device 1, 2, or 3, right? So that's why that analysis is important.
It almost seems like it's part of a response function, or I guess it's a detection function that improves the ability to respond. The effectiveness of the response, if excuse me.
Yeah, which sort of brings us down to the next requirement, which is, if you have all that stuff in place and you can theoretically do all those things, that when adverse events happen, when anomalies are detected, that those events get streamed to your team, right? They go to your SOC.
To the beeper?
It could be a beep. I haven't heard that word in a while. Yeah. Could be a beeper. But that information package or that information database, is strung up with alerts, right? So that the people who need to see those things, tickets are created, whatever. And then, the last bits here are to bring threat intel in from other places. So now maybe you're like super sophisticated and you're contributing this data that you've collected out to an information sharing org. But at the very least, use products that can take threat intel that's out there at those information sharing orgs, associate it with your logs, and be like, oh, this IP address that we're seeing in the logs that's doing something not normal, actually, that's a North Korean threat actor. You need to be super scared, right? Or who is this anomaly associated with would be great and super helpful. So get that threat intel in. A good SOC usually does that as part of what they normally do. And then when you're doing that anomaly detection, you find out it is from the North Koreans, and I'm picking. They're not responsible for all the ills of the world, but it's an example, right?
Yeah, just on your mind because of a different conversation we had earlier today.
But actually, you need to declare an incident, right? Like, okay, we've got this threat actor. It's a known threat actor. They're in the system. They've done all this stuff. kick off the incident, make sure that there's some governance around that, right? Who needs to be notified? What documentation needs to be kept, right? Or maybe you find out, oh, this is a non-issue, right? We've analyzed it, no impact, issue closed, right? Also great.
Phew.
So we're not going to talk about detection processes. Thankfully, it was moved to another part of NIST.
That makes sense. That's a big that's a lot of detail there for two categories, man. I remember when we were going through the CIS ones, we would have a 2-pager, and we'd be a little sweaty by this point in the call going through the 2-pager, but that one has so much information all blocked in one spot.
Yeah. It's, one of the things about NIST CSF is it's all really vague. Like the whole point of NIST CSF is that you're achieving the spirit of the activity, right? And so it's a bit of an exercise in creativity to figure out, is what we are doing compliant with NIST CSF requirements? Or how do we classify our activity according to NIST CSF requirements? It's a bit of a creative exercise because it's not prescriptive, right? It's all about how you are using the tools in your toolbox to fulfill that goal that's laid out by NIST CSF.
Which is probably why I've heard from so many experts why NIST, like if you're kind of just now stepping your toe as a service provider into the compliance world, it's a good place to start because, you can evaluate what you're doing right now and start to move the needle towards, like you said, the spirit of the framework. But it won't hold up necessarily.
It's about the same complexity of CIS. But it's stronger in people and process. NIST CIS controls, frankly, have a bunch of holes when it comes to people and process because they're only trying to stop 95% of attacks, which sounds like a lot, but there's that other 5% that can only be stopped by people and process.
Right.
So NIST CSF does a good job of talking about those things, but both of those frameworks are cut down, simplified versions of how to think about security. If you were to go into NIST, for example, 853, you're talking about nearly 500 controls. So
that's going to be fun to go through.
It's if you're starting out for the first time, the fact that it's 3 or 4 times simpler, that's important.
Yeah, no doubt.
So why are we here today, guys? Like, other than to learn about
we did a lot of tech. We're about to do a lot of people.
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
So humanizing MSP services in a technical realm. Johnathan, I know you said you had an exercise that you wanted to run Matt and I through.
Well,
you're in charge, man. You have you got the floor. Take us.
Boy, you've given me all of the infinity.
I told you to be yourself too before we started the call, so you've really got a lot of.
Careful what you wish for, my guys. Careful what you wish for. It was interesting. Before we kind of hit the go live button, we were talking about some of the stuff we were going to discuss at the front end of the call. Matthew, you kind of described it as maybe for some the boring stuff, which was really interesting. How that kind of ties into the topic for the roundtable piece right now, because regardless of whether you think it's boring or not, it's highly relevant to everybody on this call and certainly to your customers. And, that's just one of many examples of why, this idea of how do we connect with people, right? It's so often that our industry is dominated by engineers and developers and security professionals. Technologists, as you described yourself, Matthew. And I think most IT providers, even the owner, founder of those companies who often bears the burden of growth and sales and the people side is usually technologists first, and so how do we go ahead? You got a question there,
Forgive me for cutting you off. Don't let me cut you off. If you want to, if you want to finish that, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just basically that's the status quo. And the big challenge is bridging that gap between, the stuff that's super relevant, like NIST is, incredibly important, and most business leaders across the US, even the ones that are aware of these frameworks, like, man, it's like for them to pay attention to it is like asking them to watch paint dry.
Yeah.
And maybe for even us, like you described it yourself, Matthew, as it could potentially be perceived as boring. And yet we on this call are the ones who should care most. And if that care starts with us, the level of enthusiasm that we have for it is going to be diminished by the time it gets to the ears of our customers and our clients and our employees and all of that stuff. So that's the status quo, to paint the picture of like what we try to address today. And I particularly want to tie it into the growth side of the equation, mostly because that's where I'm most experienced, have more things to say. But what were you going to say, Zach?
Thank you. No, I love everything that you had to say there. I wanted to point out when you called out a lot of us in the MSP space are technologists first, and that's a good thing. But what's even better is to recognize why that is, because we identify that a lot of the times and say, well, because of this, there's certain things you have to do in the space, right? And I think that's not always perceived as clearly as maybe it should be. And I want to call out the reason why it's the case. People that are leaders of organizations in this world know things that most people don't know. They are specialists in a very narrow, technical, specific world that's hyper important and on the bubble of changing new technology all the time. So it's a tough space to be. It's a tough space to be regularly, and it requires a lot of attention. So the types of people that have those skills have to sacrifice their time and attention in building other skills to be hyper good at those things. So it certainly is a function in the truth of the way that the market works. But it's a good reason that it's like that. And being able to identify, these are my freaking strengths over here, and these are the things that I need to work on over here, are totally appropriate. And you also drew the point after this, or after kind of saying that I wanted to touch on. You drew the point of, we have these conversations with business owners, and they're not going to be able to get into the depth of NIST because they're focused on what they're experts at, whether it be making pizzas or, painting houses or whatever the hell it is, right? Doing bank transactions. They're going to be focused on that, but they expect you to be hyper technically, like they expect you to have the thing that is your strength. So they know that you're going to be, as a leader in the technical space, they know you're going to be that way, whatever way that is, stronger on the technical side, perhaps more often than not. And they almost want it, but you have to be able to bridge that communication gap for everybody to be able to get on the same page.
I agree. The core competencies of a typical of a service provider are obviously the reason usually that an MSP or IT provider gets engaged is the presumption of subject mastery in those areas, right? It's funny because ChannelFalcon's early on, but we already represent a nationwide network of MSPs. And some of the folks on my team are kind of new to the channel. So I had one of my guys ask me the other day, is like, hey, do we have any collateral that kind of, aggregates all of the services that our nationwide network of partners provides? Like, is it itemized? Like all of the things that our MSPs do? And I was like, that would be a very long document. But I did my best. I went and I created a document where I evaluated all of our member partners and like what they believe, what they have told me is core competency.
What they say they do.
What they say they do, right? And any IT provider listening to this call or watching this stream will probably resonate with that. It's like, man, we don't do just one thing. We do a multitude of things, and we have
a vendor, and Matt can attest to this. I'm sure as a vendor, the vision started out as one thing, and to be effective in the space, you got to do a lot of things. Yeah.
You got to do a lot of things. And, I've heard it. I've stolen this analogy from somebody, actually a former boss, good people. But changing IT providers, or like making core changes to how your IT services are delivered or secured, is kind of like running a marathon. As a business leader, it's like running a marathon and having open heart surgery at the same time, right? It is a very painful and disruptive thing, to offboard from one provider and onboard with another. Now, some of you have gotten really good at this, and your onboarding experience is really great. But then the mind of the prospect and the mind of the customer, it's IT is that for so many business leaders, it's that thing that they view as a cost center. They view it as painful and uncomfortable. And the last thing, you said, it's not sexy necessarily in their mind, to think about it. So usually what ends up happening, Michelle says exactly, multitude of services and solutions there. Totally, absolutely. But therein lies the paradox, because you as a service provider are supposed to be able to demonstrate core competencies in all of these areas and build trust and confidence with your customer. But how do you build trust and confidence with somebody that, unless they are begging for help because they are in the middle of an incident right now, or they're having a terrible experience with a current provider, there's something that's inciting them to seek out that open heart surgery.
Right.
You approach anybody else and they're like, this is the last thing I want to talk to you about. So like, you might be best at everything that you do, but when you talk about that next customer of yours, how do you earn them their mental real estate? And that might be a good segue into the little exercise that I kind of wanted to try, because I'm working on a theory right now that has actually been the seed that we planted that would grow into what ChannelFalcon is today. And I'll just, in the spirit of not holding it back, I'll just tell you what it is, and then we'll demonstrate it. I believe earning the mental real estate of your customer or your prospect, whether it's an existing customer or your future prospect, the key to earning that mental real estate, and I'll explain that more in a second, is through authentic, physical, human connection. Authentic, physical, human connection. And it's so critical to not only getting new customers, but also retaining your customers and navigating turbulent times with those customers, so that trust in your core competency never wavers. And so to that point, to make a point, I have this exercise. It's an association game. This is coming from my old improv days many moons ago.
You definitely have improv vibes. That's funny.
Oh yeah, but that's a former life. Maybe I tread the boards again one day, but
there are no former lives of acting.
Well, here's what we're gonna do. All right, and I'll go first, just not to put anyone on the spot. Matthew, I'm going to ask you to throw out to me a common noun or potentially a verb, but don't, no articles or adjectives, this, thans, or buts or whatever. Give me a verb or give me a noun, common. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spit back to you as quickly as I can in rapid succession, 3 to 5 associated concepts that come to my mind.
All right. Open.
Close, door, lock, key, mat. All right, that's what came into my drop-down menu of associated concepts. I'm going to throw one at you, Zach. I'm going to say elephant.
Tusk, hunting, cornucopia, Africa, Thailand.
Wow, is hunting elephants legal? I don't know.
No, but I think it's bad. And as soon as I said tusk, I went hunting.
Oh yeah, you went to the poaching. That's great. Okay, so those are 6 associated concepts. Throw one at Matthew, Zach.
Sure. A noun?
Just a noun or verb, anything.
Running.
Sunk. Trapped. Tripped. Fell. I don't know what's going on here.
Those are great. So I take it Matthew doesn't particularly enjoy running. This is a really, so the reason for that exercise, the human brain and its ability to build associations is incredible. And what you don't know is what is in that person's drop-down menu of associated concepts. I would have never thought that hunting would have come into Zach's, right? When I said elephants.
I don't hunt elephants at all. Not one.
But like, you don't know. For example, when I used to work with a cloud service provider, it's like I would share this example with my team, be like, hey, if I took 9 IT guys and leaned them up against a wall, right? We were private cloud, right? So take those IT guys, line them up against a wall, and you're going to say, what are the first 5 things that come into your head when I say cloud, right? And you could probably guess what's going to go into the drop-down menu of those IT guys' minds. At least 1 or 2 things. Several of them are going to say Microsoft. Some of them might say AWS.
Precipitation.
There's a bunch of things that you can kind of anticipate what some people's responses might be. But herein lies the challenge with what we do as service providers in the IT channel. That business leader that either is a customer of yours or could be a customer of yours, when their head pops off the pillow in the morning, they are not thinking about IT. They're not thinking about cloud. They're not thinking about NIST or cybersecurity or anything. There's a finite number of things that they're thinking
there to think about.
Well, and throughout their day, it's unlikely that there's going to be too much that intersects with what you do and what's in their mind. But if and when it does, and we know it will, that's the work of the service provider on the human connection piece, is to earn their slot in that drop-down menu of associated concepts, so that when they can't get into their workstation, or when they're suddenly out of, they have no connectivity in the office, their backups failed, or they experience a breach or whatever it is, there's going to be a drop-down menu of associated concepts that's forced into the forefront of their brain. And are you in that list? Now, surely with your current customers, I would hope you've earned a very legitimate spot in that list. However, I'll tell you a story that is very common, and I've heard it twice in this last month from both partners that I'm working with and partners that I'm not working with yet, where they had a lot of revenue tied up in a particular client, and they got the bad news. They got the bad news that the client's leaving them. And it's the tale of 2 MSPs. One came to me and said, well, they got bought out, so good for them. They already have, the parent company has an IT provider already, and so we're getting forced out. There's not much you can do in that case. But in the other one, it was a small IT shop, and they've had this one private school that was a fairly large account for them that has been a customer for 15 years.
It hurts my heart to even hear it described. Even if it's like a metaphorical, which I'm sure that it is, but it just aches.
These are real examples that have literally happened in the last 2 months, both that I've heard. And they don't understand. Like 15 years they've been a client, and now this person's trying to save a buck. And they're like, man, how do you get to that point? I mean, that was the rationale, was like, man, we think we can cut costs, do this ourselves cheaper. And, I'm sure everybody who's an IT provider watching this call, there's already a million things going through your drop-down menu of associated concepts. Why that is not the case. That school is going to end up in the long run paying a lot more now, trying to bring it in-house for a million different reasons that you all know. So earning and retaining that mental real estate is 2 different things, but how do you earn it? Authentic, physical, human connection. So now that's a whole other piece of this conversation, is how. I'd like to open it up to you guys, though. First of all, what do you think of that assessment of, human connection, mental real estate, how it translates into that core competency piece that we discussed earlier? And then if your mission is now to earn that mental real estate, how do you think you should do it?
So I was a management consultant for a bunch of years, and the way I always, which is a little bit different than an MSP, first of all. Okay, so with an MSP, you have a specific set of services. Maybe you've got an SLA with your customer, right?
Yeah.
You do these things, you don't do those things, right? And you've got to try to relate that value that you provide to the business problems of the day, right? But as a as a management consultant, I was singularly focused on what is the experience of this small business owner or this department head. What are the things that are pain points in their life, right? And how are those pain points either created by technology challenges or solved with technology solutions, right? And when I started my MSP, I brought that thinking along with me. But that was instilled in me really, really early in my career, right? Is like put yourself in the mind of the customer. What's actually going on in their day, right?
Right.
And the way I would figure that out always 100% of the time is I would sit through an interview with every single person in the business, if it's a small business or if it's a larger business, a person from each department or business unit, and I would ask them, "Tell me about your day. Tell me everything you do about your day." And you'd find all sorts of things, right? That even their boss didn't know about, right? Like my favorite example was where I found like things like someone's printing out a document on one computer and then like walking it across the room
Oh, you've
to
told me
another
that.
computer and scanning it back in, right? And their boss is like, I didn't know that was happening. And I was like, well, how much of your day do you think you spend doing that? And they're like, I don't know, 30-40% of my day.
Oh gosh.
And
You're
these
gonna
are
love computers.
if you don't get into the mental like that employee never would have like opened a ticket and said, I can't figure out how to like get the document from here to there, because they had that solution, right? But boy,
Yeah.
were they happy when I said, you know what, you don't have to be a robot like shuffling paper across the room anymore. Now you get to talk to the customers. like
I bet they
and
made
deal with
money.
that. Like,
I bet the business made more money and did better service. Off
yeah, I
that.
mean, I
Yeah.
I sort of wish I could go check in on them, right? Maybe I will.
Well, I loved two things that you said just now. You said that putting yourself in the mind of the customer, right? And I love that. The second thing you said is how you put yourself in the mind of the customer. And there was a word that you said, listen, right? And then you practically went on to describe you would sit down and invest tremendous time with everyone you could in the organization to listen. And that is so key. How often do we come into a prospect or a customer environment with some, give me the technical, how many users, how many servers, how many, what's your SaaS applications, what are you doing? What's your firewall situation? Tell me all of the bits and bytes, and then I'll give you a proposal. And the reality is, even if they can answer those things, you haven't really listened. You haven't really earned mental real estate. My question to you, though, Matthew, is in that scenario you described where you were able to get that, man, I think a lot of MSPs may be listening to this call or watching, would love for the opportunity for a prospect to let them come into their office and spend a whole day shadowing their employees. How did you even get them to let you do that? Let's go back. Let's follow
Sure.
that thread back to where did the initial connection in that scenario come from?
So my pre-sales process, and maybe this is a little unique in industry. I'm not sure. My pre-sales process was always to charge money for a strategic evaluation or a strategic assessment of
Yeah.
IT, not to give it for free. And it was the only way I acquired customers. You pay me to come in for somewhere between 4 and 16 hours, right? And provide you some strategic value. And I would do it. I would not do it for free, but I would do it cheap, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would set expectations with the customer that this is not free value, but this is cheap value. They would understand that those prices did not reflect, what a long-term engagement would look like, right? This is me covering costs, a little bit of cost to come in and do this thing that's really valuable for you.
Yeah.
And then I would bring them the insights, and I would say, look, this is what I'm going to do different for you. This is what I suggest you do different. This is how you're going to save money over a 5-year period, a 2-year period, a 1-year period, right? This is how you're going to make money or make your customers happier, make your employees happier over 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. And I would absolutely not hand them like a list of SKUs and say, here's the price. That was not on offer. I would sell them the vision. And when they say, yes, I want this vision, then I would cook up the numbers, and they'd be reasonable, right?
Right.
But
Right.
but the report that I would hand to them, which was always an actual thing I handed to them, was not, this is what I want to sell you. It's, this is what's going on for you right now, and this is what you need.
Yeah. This is what we've learned because we listened, because you shared, and because now that we've gone through this exercise, hopefully we have established a little bit of trust in our core competencies that we've been able to demonstrate in this initial engagement. Here are our recommendations in a consultative capacity. This is what I think you should do. I love that. I love that. Reduced rate rather than cheap. What you offer, what you offer is valuable. Okay. That's great feedback, Michelle. I agree. I thought the same thing, but I wasn't going to call Matthew out. You did it for it.
But it's in the customer's lexicon, right? In the customer's lexicon. And yeah, you do need to talk about, you need to be aware of what they're thinking, right?
Yeah. I love that.
So I'm curious, what are some ways you believe that you can earn mental real estate with somebody? Well, we can even maybe expand this beyond it, just in a professional, personal context, because I think if we can identify the ways you earn mental real estate just generally, then we can back that into specifically as service providers, how can we, with a prospective customer or an existing customer, seek to earn more of that mental real estate? Because I'll just say it, the provider with the most mental real estate wins. It is always true. It is not a price thing ever. And if you disagree with me on that, well, we can have another conversation about this. It's not a price thing. It's not even a value thing necessarily. It's first and foremost who's occupying the mental real estate. And I'll give you an example of why I know that's true. You take 10 service providers and you ask them where their last client came from. How many of them are going to say from a referral or from word of mouth?
Yeah.
Probably 8, 9, maybe 10 of them will say that. Yeah. And why is that? Because that trusted brokered relationship, we brokered that mental real estate. Someone already occupies it as an existing customer or a strategic partner, already occupies that mental real estate. Anyhow, soapbox off of for now.
No, I love, you sounded like you were playing a symphony for me. You could just keep doing that all day. It's freaking great.
But I want to hear from you guys. Like, I mean, I've got my own theories about how we earn mental real estate, but how do you think you earn mental real estate?
It honestly just floors me hearing you describe it as mental real estate, because I think that's like the most attuned way to describe it. Because I heard recently you can only have a genuine relationship with about 250 people. And, that's another expression of mental real estate. You've only got so much time. You've only got so much RAM, right? You can only maintain conversations and, with X amount of people and things at a time. Thursdays, I have really busy Thursdays, and I could all day long until 10 p.m. I could keep myself busy. Unintentionally. It's just like, oh my God, I just have been nonstop all day, and even trying to not. So the idea of mental real estate and real estate of the thoughts that we have, I think is so, it's ethereal and it's a high level concept, and I love it. The way that I want to say that I think you could do it best, and it sounds simple and stupid, but I really genuinely believe this, is you got to be available. And the way that you're maximally available as an organization is you build I almost said the F word really hard. You build a frickin' team so that somebody can man the fire at night, right? In the community, somebody's at the watchtower, somebody's at the lighthouse, somebody's got the fire going so the bears don't roll up. Somebody is taking care of the people that are trying to come into the community. So you can be like, oh yeah, I got you right over here. Here's where the ducks are. So you build a team, and then you just somebody's got to be available, and I think that's important. So that's what I think.
I think the key word that you shared just then, and I think you're right. The key word in what you said though is the team, because availability for sure. You need those teams to be available, but if I ask an IT provider what your differentiator is, like what makes you unique versus using, hiring my nephew who's finishing his computer science degree at the local community college versus working with you. Why? What's different? What's better? And a lot of IT providers don't really know how to answer that. Or when they do, the answer is like, well, it's our technology. Well, it's not your technology. You can go get backups anywhere. You can go get Microsoft directly. You can go get threat hunting and risk monitoring and SOC SIM EDR from anywhere. Phone systems don't make you different. Your technology doesn't make you special. I'm sorry. What makes you special is your people. I just went through this exercise with a client recently where, the answers to that question, what makes you different, were things like, well, it's our customer service. Like, does it make you special though? And hands-on experience, I hear that. And that is true. Hands-on experience, your core competency, it's going back into that.
But if the person that has that hand-on experience bursts into flames, now your company doesn't have that hands-on experience anymore.
Yeah, well, so you need to have multiple hands, which goes back into your point about team, So people are unique. Where technology is not, people are unique. And the experience, core competencies of those people are unique. So like in your messaging from like a sales and marketing standpoint, saying that we're a Microsoft partner doesn't really mean a lot to a prospect. Saying that we're a Fortinet partner or we resell this or that doesn't really mean a lot to a prospect because they can get that anywhere, but they can't get you anywhere. And that goes back to that idea of what I believe is the key. What I believe is the key is authentic, physical, human connection, which is why no one really is going to make a decision for IT services based off of a pretty, pay-per-click ad that they saw on LinkedIn or Facebook or Google search. That might be one of the breadcrumbs they follow to find you, maybe, but it's not going to be why they buy. It's not going to be why they become your customer. And it's definitely not going to be why they stay. It's going to be mental real estate. And the only people that can occupy mental real estate are other people. So the human component is so key. So,
well, and
go ahead.
They may, you may play golf with these guys, or you may you may like to hang out at the local corner bar and watch football together, right? Like they will keep you, they will provide you a sliver of mental real estate for that reason, right? But to give you like the size mental real estate for you to really capitalize on that, to build a business relationship off that's rewarding for both parties, they need to associate that genuine human connection they have with you with how they feel, right? Which is not necessarily the beer, right? Because they're paying you, right? They don't need to pay you to like sit down and have beer with you, right? But they might need to pay you so that they just sleep well at night, knowing that their business is taken care of. Yeah. So that they know if they add 3 more employees next week, like they don't need to like be shopping on CDW or whatever to like track down like cables and crap. Like they need to know that you're going to get them to that place, right? We're doing our promised land exercise, so I'm like super aware of this week because we do this every year, and we're doing it right now. But I think as an MSP, you have to decide what you want your market position to be, right? And there's not one market position. There's not even one right market position, right? But you have to tell your customer what your market position or what's the position they're looking for in a vendor, and can you fulfill that position, right?
Every lineup needs a couple of different things, and if you're looking for a 3-4 hitter, so somebody that does something very specific, or if you're looking for somebody that does this really well, you need to know that. And in the same way, you need to be able to communicate to the client what you're going to do. Know internally what the hell you do well. I think so many of us are so afraid of saying, well, I'm good at this and I'm bad at this, because it hurts to say what we're bad at. But put the shit on the scale, and weigh some of the positives too, because I think we'd all be surprised.
Honestly, it's a mark of a mature service provider to be able to admit this is where I lack strength, because what does that allow you to do? You're gonna do one of two things. You're gonna focus on your strengths, or you're going to work where you need to grow your weaknesses into strengths. And those are things. And honestly, it builds so much credibility with the customer. There's nothing more human than fallibility. Let me say that again. There's nothing more human than not being perfect. And if you want to earn trust and confidence of your customer, man, tell them what you don't do. Tell them what you suck at, and they will resonate with that on a primal emotional level, because they suck at stuff too, right?
Well, and then they know you're being honest and you're willing to be honest. And if
Correct.
I say I'm bad at this, but I'm really good at this, then it's like, well, I bet he's bad at that, but I bet he's really good at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so back to the customer service thing as a differentiator. Like, nobody's advertising as we have terrible customer service. Nobody says our customer service sucks.
You ever been to
like on their websites and in their social media, and no one's admitting that publicly, that our customer service sucks. So to say that your customer service is what makes you special everyone says that, right? But like, the reality is, you guys need to be brokers. You folks need to be brokers of trust and confidence. And the way that people will trust you is when you've earned that human connection, that mental real estate. And why I say authentic, physical, and human. So like, there's, a pretty picture on social media is not human. This is why on a marketing side, let me put my marketing hat on for just a second. Like, putting a pretty stock image on Facebook is not human. And even putting a picture of, like, it's better to put pictures of your people, right? So like, that is one step closer to human, but it's not even fully human. A video is really, really close to human, because you can see it, you can hear it. Those are physical things that I, as a human, can interact with physically, right? And that's as close to a in-person proximity representation as you can get. A phone call is really human, and that's why cold calling might not be dead. That's a whole other soapbox, but like, that is human. It's a flesh and blood voice that's coming through, that is being received physically. But obviously, physical proximity, right? Zach, you and I met at an event last year, right? Yeah. You and I met. This is how this conversation came about, was because of authentic, physical, human connection. I shook your hand.
We high-fived. It was so crisp.
Oh yeah, man.
And he remembers that, apparently. So that means something, right?
It ain't nothing.
This was months ago.
This was months ago. And honestly, those little microns of physical proximity that you can replicate do earn you a little bit more each time. So golf course, you mentioned, that's an example. I have this saying: where your prospect is, there you shall also be. If it's in their local chamber of commerce, if it's at their local production of Shrek, if it's if it's at a baseball game, if it's in like a BNI network or wherever it is, if it's in their inbox, if it's in their voicemail, if it's you literally walk into their office, shake their hand, and give them a box of donuts with no expectation, and that's key, with no expectation. All you're there to do is to build connection. That is where your next customer comes from. And if you want to know more about that, I know we don't have a lot of time, so like, hit me up.
No, man, I think it's just, this was great. You're an excellent speaker. You're thoughtful about the topic. I mean, obviously, what a thing for you to speak about, humanizing interactions in the technical space. I mean, you really are thoughtful about it. So thank you for coming on. We're grateful to have you. Give us your elevator for each of your organizations, because we want people to know, like, man, this guy's insightful. What the hell do his organizations do? We would love for people to be able to have those takeaways.
Well, let me just start by saying it's a sincere pleasure to be here. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I am passionate about it. Both the front end of this call and what we've been able to dig in here together right now are very, very precious to me. And so I'm grateful for this. As far as like an elevator, I mean, I would encourage you, if you are an IT provider, and you're struggling to earn the mental real estate of your next client, right? Or you feel like you've got clients right now that are at risk of churning because maybe you don't occupy the mental real estate of that client like you could or should. Reach out. ChannelFalcon is new. It's in an alpha state right now, and it's
Really
maybe not.
neat idea.
Yeah, it's maybe not for everybody, but we're trying to approach the idea of, and I'm going to throw up in my mouth as I say words like lead generation or business development, because those things are thrown around. They're thrown around so flippantly, and in our marketplace, there's a lot of, I don't want to say snake oil. There's just a lot of solutions and approaches
A
that
lot of
work
noise.
a lot of noise that works maybe better in enterprise, maybe better in software, maybe better. But for what you guys do as service providers, ChannelFalcon's trying to streamline some stuff. The pitch, if you will, is what we do is my team goes out into the marketplace and we look for qualified opportunities. We don't look for leads. We look for people that have a legitimate need for managed IT, cybersecurity, and or compliance. And then we have a nationwide network of partners, which, as of right now, 6 months in, we have nationwide network coverage already. There's 14 providers in our network, and it's growing all the time. But when we find an opportunity, we basically do the work to connect them to one of our member partners. So if that's interesting to you, reach out to me, go to channelfalcon.com, or you can find me on social media and reach out to me through a DM or whatever. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, but would love to chat with you folks about it.
Awesome. We're grateful to have you. Matt, do you want to say a few words to the lovely people?
Well, thanks for sticking around, guys. We're here to support channel providers too. Sales, service delivery, and evidencing, cybersecurity, cyber compliance. Get us out of here, Zach.
Okay. Next week, we're going to be having some folks from Stride, Meg and Casey. We're going to be having conversations around pricing using actionable data. I love actionable data. I also really like Meg and Casey. I think those guys are also great conversations. Johnathan, super grateful to have had you. Everybody who's with us still, super grateful for you guys as well. If this is your first time at the MSP Cyber Roundtable, make sure to check out our YouTube. There's a lot of great educational content there. And be sure to like us on LinkedIn. We will see you guys next week.